Andrea, pleasure to have you on. So excited to talk about Full House and your really cool startup that you're building. Maybe we can talk about the origin of your company. And we were talking about the 10-year overnight success joke before, right? It's been 10 years since you founded the company. Maybe take us back to that foundational moment, like how you come up with the idea.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so going way back now. So originally, Full House really started as a side business. I was working as an in-house lawyer for a real estate firm, and a friend of mine was an interior designer, and we just started like, hey, let's start this like, secondhand designer vintage store online. Came up with the name Full House. The .com was available, and like, sure enough, it was like early days of e-com, right? Like 10 years ago. I mean, not early days, but definitely like startup early days. And so we launched Full House. We started like squatting in one of the commercial buildings that I was, sort of managing in charge of at the real estate firm. And, we were refurbishing furniture. And at one point, I was looking to leave my full time job, and I had applied for a job at Sonder. And at that point, it was called Flatbook. It was a long time ago. It was very early days of them as well. And they were looking to scale their operations as well. They wanted to hire me as sort of a head of real estate or something real estate related. And I was like, you know what? I already have a job that looks like that. I just started a design company, hire us to do the design instead. And sure enough, at that time, it was Francis and Lucas. They're like, fantastic, we have a unit upstairs. Can you come and see it? And so we did literally like, I don't know, second, third interview, whatever it was, went up and saw it and took the contract, helped them get their first unit live. And then sure enough, we helped them kind of scale their first year operations, which was also our first year. And it kind of snowballed from there. Everybody got to know who we were, started calling us to help them expand. It was that heyday of Airbnb, and like the short-term rental boom, 2015, 16. So yeah, so that's kind of how we got started, and expanded into the US in 2018. And it's kind of been rock and roll ever since. It's been a lot of changes in this industry, so you got to roll with the punches. But it's been a really exciting time to develop this, and I like to say that I've got one of the best jobs in the world. So yeah, that's
That's
kind
very
of
cool.
early
That's very
days.
cool.
Yeah,
That's interesting. Yeah, Flatbook. I hadn't heard that name in a while. Obviously,
yeah,
like it's fun to see how you guys grew at the same time. How
yeah.
did you come up with the name? Like, where does the name come from?
Yeah, the name is actually really kind of deep. It's actually, well, it's Buckminster Fuller. So okay, so original origin story is that Full House is really founded on the design aesthetic of Montreal, right, where we're from, in the heydays of the 60s and 70s. You have all of that sort of mid-century design, and Montreal was really founded around that time, right? Founded, I mean, obviously way before that, but it kind of had its boom in that era, right? With 67 Expo and 76 Olympics. That's when we saw a lot of like, modern design pop up in the city. And, one of the big sort of icons for Full House is Buckminster Fuller, architect, innovator, if you know him. And he designed the geodesic dome that was the USA pavilion during Expo 67, which is now, on Ile Saint-Hélène there. And so it's Fuller with Bauhaus, which is also a lot of the architecture that's in Montreal. So Fuller, Bauhaus, Full House were like lightbulbmoment.com available. Let's go. So all of Full House's branding and sort of, design is really kind of echoing that original Montreal, like, original icon era. Even now our AI tool, Ludwig, is based off of Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, who also built in Montreal, Westmount Square, amongst other things. So yeah, so that's where the whole naming comes from.
That is such a cool story. That is
Yeah,
really such a cool story. I was gonna say something stupid like Full House, the sitcom, as like as a kid. I used to
yeah,
love that show.
yeah.
But it makes so much
Same.
sense. And yeah, and like you said, you speak to the kind of like the boom times of Montreal, how it really got on the map.
Yeah.
Maybe a rookie question because it's really not my space. But how much of the work you do has a art element like this notion of
Creative.
understanding, yeah, exact creativity, understanding the latest trends versus more rational right brain, like, square footage, space, color, like.
Technical. Yeah. So, what I do, unfortunately, is all right brain. So, the left brain is my co founder, Pierce Atkinson, who's head of design, and he's really the creative part. And, I generally have to, scale and run the business. But um, I think that everything that we do is really like we don't skimp on good design. And I think, our tagline is good design every stay. And it's really because we're not here to compromise design, even though budgets may be compromised in the market of like short term rentals or hospitality. Budgets are a big part. And, we just don't believe in compromising good design and good quality, and we'll always try to work with your budget, even if it means like, hey, let's pare down some of the quantity to meet you where you need to be, but don't skimp on good design. So everything that we do is always led with good design. And I even say that, if anybody wants to work at Full House, it's you come here because you have an appreciation for design in whatever respect, whether it's UI UX, whether it's product, whether it's construction, architecture, and interior. You have to come to Full House with a profound appreciation for good design because we have to implement it in everything that we do. So it's really one of the tenets of who we are and our culture at Full House, and really where, even though you're not, left or right brained or whatever it is, everything that you do has to be led with a good design intent, from decks to emails. It's always do good design. So it's really foundational
Interesting.
to Full House. Yeah.
It makes me think a bit of like the Airbnb co-founder. I think his name is like Joe Gibbia, which is like, like you have like Brian, who's like,
Yeah.
the super business guy, and then Joe, who's like the design head. I find an interesting analogy there as to like, well, the product you're building and scaling has both components.
Yeah.
Maybe again, a very simple question, but it's like your customers will be, the Saunders, the Airbnbs, other property management. You sell them services. We're like, hey, we'll help augment your space, so they'll hire you. And this is like a one-time purchase. Is there like kind of an ongoing relationship? How do you sell to them?
Yeah. So, we generally work with kind of twofold, owners and then operators and property managers. It's an interesting landscape in this kind of operational hospitality space because the owners are largely the ones they're both stakeholders in the eventual turnout of the aesthetic of their properties, right? And it's a huge investment, right? From the furnishing and design is really like your brand, right? That you're putting forward. So often we actually do work with these companies to develop their brand standards and to develop their desired look and feel, even if it's for a season or a collection. And so that's kind of a lot of the recurring nature of our work and how we work with our customers and our clients. But when we're working largely with the owner side of things, they'll develop certain properties every in longer spurts of time, right? So you'll have like an owner who's going to develop a tower every year or two, right, at best. And that's kind of like the nature of that business. Whereas on the operator side, they're acquiring, properties in terms of leasing or operating, and that'll happen a lot more often. So we largely developed their brand standards, and now we've developed with Ludwig a platform where they can kind of implement these brand standards across multiple properties. So, I mean, if we should get into it now, Ludwig is our
Yes,
patented
please.
AI. Yeah, so it's our patented AI technology, right? Which, really stemmed from the fact that customers come to us with a dream, right? So their desired aesthetic for a space and a floor plan. And then they ask us how much and like, what goes in it. And it takes a really long time and a lot of understanding to really interpret what that dream means. Like, what specifically do you like about this image, right? So, what is it that you're actually saying to me? And images are really poor ways, or sorry, language is a really poor way of conveying design. So when we ask a customer, like, explain this to me, the language that they have to actually do that is really poor because what you call contemporary is not what I call contemporary, right? So it's really hard to actually translate. So Ludwig was really devised in order to be able to provide users, customers alike, with an instant version of what they're trying to convey, right? So it's like you get an instant recommendation. You upload your Pinterest board or an image of what you want your space to look like, and you get an instant recommendation for your property based on that entire look. And then you can easily go in there, swap, edit, change, and check out. Everything is easily checked out in one space. So that was really why we developed this, so that we could sort of facilitate the communication between, our firm and like designers and the end user, and also equip the end user with the capacity to be able to do it themselves, where sometimes the design fees are a little bit too high for them. So it really kind of became something to kind of give people a better way of procuring furniture, right? Based on your inspiration, right? Which is ultimately what you have to do. The only real alternative to doing this is that you have to go across multiple storefronts or multiple e-com or retailers and kind of compile all of this data right onto some sort of a deck that you can see it, visualize it all together, and then go back and check out through all of these multiple sources. So it just seemed like it was a really exhausting way of working, and we had to streamline it, so we did.
Yeah, that's really cool. So like, I'll
Yeah,
spit it back to you and tell me, Andrea, if I've mistaken it. But when I
sure.
understand the legacy business, and I'm not trying to put a negative spin. Let's say the
No.
existing business, the core of it is people that take inputs from the customers. Like, hey, I want contemporary X. They'll do a
Yeah.
bunch of research. They'll put into like a deck and present it, and then they'll say yes, no, I want this kind of furniture, and then you'll go and you negotiate with the actual manufacturers, the OEMs, and buy the product. Is that correct?
uh Yes and no. It's not so much that we go back and negotiate. So we have over 300 suppliers that we've built rapport with over the past 10 years, right? So the legacy business is really it is very traditional in the way that there's a lot of communication back and forth, and our internal team has to source across 300 suppliers to try and create the package that the customer is looking for, right? So now Ludwig instantly iterates on all of the furniture that we have available to us and presents packages based on their look, and that we can then edit and present something to the client much faster, and the
Got it.
client can
Got it.
also
Yeah.
do this themselves. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So on the one side
Yeah,
is like it becomes an internal tool that like basically turbocharges your team of designers. So it's like you're able to like
exactly.
give much more robust, kind of like the analogy of like the chess player. Chess player plus the algorithm is much stronger.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, you're also offering. So that one, I guess, helps increase gross margin, right? You're doing the work faster.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the other side, the tool, you're able to like democratize and offer like the design assistance to people that can't afford, let's say,
Exactly.
in hiring you guys directly.
Exactly. Because there is obviously a cost to be attributed to designers and the time it takes for somebody else to do the work. But we also know that there's a large spectrum of the world that, can do it themselves and want to, right? They're very involved in that process. And so basically, we've equipped them with the best possible tools to be able to do that. So we're just trying to kind of exactly democratize design for everybody across all budgets.
That's really cool. That's really cool. And what kind of
Yeah.
data are you feeding into Ludwig? Like, is it proprietary? Like, how? Like, for instance, if you start like, if other models, foundational models, start trying to do this type of like general purpose design, what makes your model unique?
So what's really unique is the way that our algorithm works, in terms of the way it calculates what you need in your space. So effectively, it's determining everything that goes into a living room, and all of the objects that you're going to need in there, and then also attributes that weighted based on the aesthetic of the image input, right? So we weight all of those products based on the aesthetic of the image, and then present you with a result that most closely resembles that image. So it's really proprietary in the way that we, you know, produce that algorithm, and how we attribute that weight, based on our own interior design and service. So we've done this enough times that we know exactly how to kind of do that. The data itself, so like where does our furniture data come from? It comes from our suppliers, right? So it's obviously we don't own that product. What we really own is the algorithm around it, and obviously all the image inputs that people are depositing. So that's
Yeah,
really
fascinating.
where our
It's such a
data
neat
comes
idea,
from.
right? You take all this like experience of having done, like the heavy lifting of having done
Yeah.
design for, like hundreds, thousands of customers, and then translate it into software. How's adoption been since you've launched Ludwig?
Yeah, it's been really exciting. I mean, we've got over 1,200 users right now. And we just launched actually Enterprise, which Enterprise is really for that property manager that's scaling they really want that brand aesthetic and they want a siloed environment where their owners or their franchisees can onboard into their brand aesthetic. So we've just launched that literally like yesterday, but only because we'd already like sold this version of the software. We started seeing that this is exactly what people wanted. So now we've just kind of neatly packaged it and created, a really streamlined sort of product around it. But yeah, now what we're seeing is like we're working with one large franchisee in the US, and they're a restaurant. We don't do restaurants. It was never within, our scope. And what we've seen is that, restaurant franchises, they need this branded environment. So anybody can just open a franchise, onboard the product, buy all of the tables and chairs on spec as required, and then, also customize it for their internal space. So that's been really exciting to see how this is now also applying to different verticals. Um, and yeah, so it's super imminent, very fresh out the door, and it's been an interesting reaction to Ludwig. A lot of our business now is kind of changing as people are reacting to this new way of furnishing, and they're asking us for different ways to implement it. Um, and it's also really changed a lot of different other products that we're kind of talking to and offering. We're also discussing with other large retailers that, if you're not aware, but anytime you see a package of furniture in store or on a screen, somebody has to put that together, right? And stock changes, inventory changes. So you're not able to offer that same package constantly. So you always need somebody else to recommend something different. So what we're seeing is that we're seeing a lot of retailers and other e-com stores be very interested in onboarding Ludwig as somewhat of a conversion tool also on their own websites. And those have been really exciting discussions that we've been having. So yeah, so it's opened up a lot of doors, and it's really exciting. It's an exciting time.
It's kind of wild. Yeah, you
Yeah.
said the word exciting a few times, and I feel it's like you have probably too many opportunities right now. Like it sounds like you can take the product into a bunch of different areas. You mentioned already two, three different like markets that you're exploring. How do you think about that today in terms of like focusing your energy? Right, you have limited,
Yeah.
people, money. How do you decide what to tackle first?
Yeah, a lot of leadership meetings. A lot of leadership meetings. That's really how we go about it. Because it's true, it gives us kind of access at the touch of a button to a lot of people, right? And a lot of different ways. We can't spend money on every possible demographic, right? We don't have those marketing budgets yet. So yeah, so that's kind of, we really have to put effort into the right things. And I mean, like any other good spreadsheet, we have many on the subject and look at all these different verticals in different ways. One of the things that we really did and are looking forward to doing, or putting into motion a lot this year, is really honing in on the property manager, real estate agent, the people who are in contact with owners as opposed to going direct to owner each time. And it's largely because we think that property managers, operators, people who are really like the ones managing the property, are are one of the key stakeholders to moving this forward, right, with owners. So that's kind of where we've re-emphasized our energy. We're lucky to have gotten such great data and like being a bit more mature in the startup landscape. I don't know if we're still a startup anymore, but being a little bit of a more mature business, we have a lot of key data around, what products are working and how, and what are conversion rates like. So it's been really great in the stage of business that I like to see. Um, you know how to pull and push the levers a little bit better. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Yeah, like more data allows you to make, better calculated
Yeah,
decisions.
yeah,
And I imagine you're going after bigger players, let's say like Group Mac, that's based here, right? Like that's the huge giant, billion plus dollar company. imagine the conversations with those types of players should be really interesting, because then it could really allow you to, like, sign much bigger deals, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, definitely. The unfortunate reality, though, is that we're kind of we do market ourselves as available in Canada, but Ludwig is not, and it's only because we've not yet onboarded our Canadian suppliers. So we're starting to do that now. I so much of our revenue is really U.S. based, right? So that's kind of, being the market that it is, the US market just is a lot easier to kind of flex into. It's much more attainable. Shipping costs in Canada can be so extensive, right? And furniture is not small, so it is something. It's something of a stretch, and I do think that Canadians really deserve better pricing on furniture and better pricing on goods. And when we do offer similar products in the US, it's at a fraction of the Canadian price. And I don't want to go into Canada unless I can be a little bit more competitive. So that's largely where that kind of struggle is. But we do have some exciting things on the way in terms of making that product a lot more available and, cost friendly for the Canadian user. But it's just, yeah,
Yeah, I say also selling in U.S. currency and being based here is not a bad thing.
it's definitely a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely an
I know
optimal
it's
way of
early
working.
in the journey. Sorry, I cut you off there. I know it's early in the journey, but how are you thinking about managing the shift? It sounds like the Ludwig opportunity is like almost endless versus the classic business. I know you obviously know very well. How have you thought about that shift? Do you foresee a day Ludwig is really like 90+%, or do you see the legacy business really kind of fundamental as well?
Um, Shift. I don't know if it's so much of a shift as it is an enhancement of the existing business, right? So the way that I see it is that we've created this technology, right? And this technology effectively increases our revenue capacity, right? Full House is effectively the first user customer of Ludwig, right? So now Ludwig can also offer similar revenue generating capacity to other similar furniture companies. So that's kind of how I see it. It's less of a shift in Full House's business. A Full House continues to service its clients in the way that it always has, and now with optimized resources, right? So that's really always true. Now the question on like what can Ludwig do outside of Full House is one of the exciting pieces to like limitless opportunity, right? Because we're talking to retailers in Europe and the UK, whereas like Full House cannot necessarily service that market without being physically there. So it's exciting to see how these two different parts of the business can accelerate. But I really do think of it kind of as a separate department, as a separate product within the business.
Yeah, it's like Full House is the first and best customer of Ludwig, so
Yeah.
that's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
Um, I know we were talking about this before recording, but like fundraising, you're like potentially looking to raise capital. How are you evaluating that opportunity? How's it going along? How do you look at it? From the VC perspective, I know we're both kind of like opining
Yeah.
on how the shitty the markets are right now.
Exactly. It's like what fundraising, right? I mean, like, yeah, it's, what founder isn't always fundraising? I think like you're always fundraising. That's always going to be true. Um, for me personally, I want to not have to fundraise. I want to not. And I think that right now we're almost at the position of not having to. Granted, like we were just talking, offline, was that like it's like you're running with your hands tied behind your back. So it's like there's so much demand, there's all this exciting stuff. You really just do have to buckle down and like restrain and focus so much more when you're in this bootstrap sort of way. I feel very fortunate to be in this revenue generating, position, and like Full House has its clients, Full House has its positioning in the market. So for that reason, like it's okay to not fundraise. Excuse me. but um but yeah, I mean, I do miss the heyday of when you could go out there with a super exciting pitch and like dream up the world and like really be excited about your business and be so excited to tell people. about like, the dreams of like where you can take this. And today it just kind of feels like nobody really wants to hear about the dream. They really just want to hear about pragmatic results, right? So it just kind of puts a damper on the really exciting part about being a startup. Anyway, in my personal experience, that's kind of been the thing, because I can go on and dream like till the cows come home, right? But I don't think that's really what people want to hear. So you just kind of have to move forward and really focus on sales. I mean, I can't imagine what it's like to be a new startup that is not revenue generating right now and doesn't have the resources. And there's, so much fun, so much dry powder in the market, but nobody's dispersing. So it sucks. It sucks. I feel for the founders that are out there. I feel for the founders that are also struggling to get grants and all of the, additional funding available. And um, I just think it's a really weird time not to encourage businesses to flourish, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
it's the struggle's real.
Yeah, the word persistence comes to mind. Like having, you said, 10 plus years, and not giving up, and going back to having a dream and a vision, and like
Yeah,
not letting go on that, even though sometimes, like, the, as you said, it's like, oh, you have to temper your expectations, but you still have to
yeah,
dream big. Maybe to give us some lessons now that you've, done it 10 years, and like I'm sure other founders look up to you for to what you've done. You having quit your job, and then started this thing, and it's working. It's,
yeah,
granted, with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
yeah.
Any personal lessons along the way? Like, what have any takeaways, any perspective, even though that you're
Oh,
still in it, you're still building.
yeah. I like to. I mean, on a funny note, I say starting a business is great when you're young and dumb. So it's kind of like you really need to have a little bit more naivety to really enter this. But it's tough to have like an overall view on like what it takes, because we've been through hell in the past 4 years. Like it's been COVID, it's been interest rates, it's been inflation, market trends. Like it's been a weird time. So I really struggle to come up with any overall, advice or opinion on like this is how you do it, right? Because I don't know that there's necessarily a formulaic way of going about startup or entrepreneurship today. Um, I think also there's a lack of attention being given to different media sources. Like even like when we're talking about like, okay, like your go-to-market strategy, is the go-to-market strategy is like one of the most difficult things to figure out right now, because without people working in office, with conferences being a little bit sporadic and a little bit, you know, strange, to pick up the pace on like what is this new way of living. um, you're 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 entirely relying on social media, right? So largely your go to market is going to be advertising, social media, and probably conferences. And the thing is, social media changes. Like I was just talking with my husband that we got on Facebook in university, right? That was the big play at Facebook, right? It was university. Um, Super exciting time. And it's like just, a few years later, it's practically irrelevant to our demographic, right? So it's like with a landscape that's changing this quickly, technology that's changing this quickly, being subject to algorithms and really having no transparency on that, it makes it super difficult to understand how to reach your audience. And I don't know that we have to constantly be looking at new avenues and new ways of marketing ourselves and reaching the people that we want to talk to. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of my take on that piece.
Yeah, it makes me think of, like, the word of agility, right? So being able to always adapt, like I said, back in the day, like
Yeah,
Facebook was the thing. Now it's like you go to Facebook, you're like, like feels like a place for older people. And like
yeah,
I'm categorizing myself in that list, but always going after your customer. And then how do you think about then, the customer, then like finding the customer, creating value? How do you stay on top of, that insight that you had back in the day of like good design, good price,
Mhm.
and speed of experience. How does that
Mhm.
has that evolved? How do you stay on top of that?
I mean, I think if you do good work and you have a good product, it speaks for itself. So, like, your ultimate place that you need to go to is referrals, right? There's nothing more valuable than somebody else telling someone, use this company or work with them, right? It's your best reference for, new business. But I do think that, it is honing in on that customer experience a lot more, right? Like, make sure that you develop a good product every single time. Make sure that you are listening to your customers, and you're adapting and you're changing, and you're you know creating the product that they ultimately need. um yeah, I think that that's going to be, like, that's your number one source of growth, is when people know who you are, right? And they actually trust your product. So
Yeah.
I think that that's really, when I look back now, one of the biggest things that we have is that we've been in the same industry for as long as we have, and that we have a good, placement in the market. So it's and it comes off doing really good work. And let me tell you, we did really bad work at times, and we learned our lessons so many times. The amount of times that I've, jumped on install because shit goes wrong, and you got to be there for your customer, and you have to show them that you show up when things go wrong. So, I've been there and I've done it, and I encourage our entire team to be there. So yeah, so it's really important, good customer service.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't think of a better way to end the interview, Andrea. I think it's a huge respect for what you've built so far, and it feels like even though it's 10 years in, it feels like you're just getting going with this new opportunity on with Ludwig. So yeah, we'll have to do a round two in a little bit of time and see how much you've taken over the world.
Yeah, definitely. I really look forward to it. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Final question would be: is if people want to learn more, reach out, connect with you, what's the best way?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, social LinkedIn is probably easy access, but don't hesitate to email me as well. I'm always looking to speak to other people who are in the industry business. Super easy. Andrea@fullhouse.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Andrea.
Awesome, Nectar. Thank you so much.